Oh, hello, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of in12d. I'm here on my own. My co-host is had to drop out for a reason today, but I'm not alone in the studio. I have an amazing guest to share with you guys. This week's episode 43, is titled Enchanted Identity: Transforming with Our Archetypes. And I'm really fascinated by this one. I just think you should stay on for the whole of this episode because you're going to really kind of find out a lot more about how you can kind of implement this. We were talking today about what if your true identity isn't something you create, but something you actually uncover. And our special guest today is Yamilca Rodriguez, who's hailing from Kentucky in the US. She's an old friend we met many years ago, and then we bumped into each other as you do in a conference in the UK, and we just kind of sparked up our friendship again. So, a huge warm welcome to you, Yamilca. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here.
So Yamilca you're the founder of Bespoke Branding, and then you were a former brand leader with Procter Gamble. So you've come out of the corporate, and you've really started to work with this. And from what I can understand from our conversations, it's really going a lot deeper than just kind of surface level. So do you want to just drop in where when you made that transition, maybe from corporate into starting this branding using the archetypes? How did that come about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I was dabbling with archetypes inside Procter and Gamble, right? We had
Oh,
already kind of started looking at I had an agency partner who was really into archetypes. So, everything we did, we kind of put the archetype lens on it. And so I found it so fascinating, and it was really great to get the team in line with it. And even when I would talk, I managed agencies. That's what I did at Procter. And so when I would talk to my agency partner and tell them kind of what direction we wanted to go, it was a conversation we could have based with archetypes. So I made the conversation go faster, easier, understandable. And so it just helped us move things forward in a much quicker and speedy way.
cool. So you were already doing it. So it's something that do a lot of that comes up naturally in that kind of part of the industry, like that people can identify their brand through the archetypes or
Yes. So it is something a lot of people do. And it was this book written, it was called The Hero and the Outlaw. And it was all about how to use archetypes in branding. And so that's kind of the book we based everything off. But as we were working through some of the pieces, there's no formula for this. So
yeah.
as we were working, we kind of developed our own way and our own framework. And we also discovered new things that really helped us uncover, we talked about uncover deeper elements and essences of a brand.
Okay. So there like I know when we were chatting about this just a couple of days ago, we were talking about that kind of hero's journey. So there is a sort of like every brand or every business, every person really in it is going through their own sort of, I suppose their challenges and their triumphs and their, things like that. So it's sort of one experience is informing the next, so to speak. Like so with Enchanted Identity, like that's like the how we were excited to title this episode. How do you want to just dive into the enchanted part of that identity, like
Yeah,
the
so I want to kind of tell you how Enchanted Identity kind of came to be.
yeah.
Um, so as I was working, I'm working on my dissertation in identity, and as I was working through it, one of my trainers or a course I was doing in poetry, as I was going through it, I was really focused on getting clarity on the direction where I was going with this, where I wanted to go with it. At the beginning of the process, I thought, oh, I'll definitely do archetypes. But as I kept diving in, there was something deeper that needed to be something that I needed to challenge myself with, rather than something that I already knew and understood fully. So one of the things that kind of came to be is like, you're in and we talked about this prior, but I don't think we related it to this, is, you're kind of a fairy. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, because in my poems, a lot of fairy stuff came up. And there's been a lot of fairy things kind of in my life. And so I was like, yeah, she's like, you should do it on fairies. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do my dissertation on fairies. This is right before we actually encountered each other in November,
Yeah.
after so many years. And so working through that process of this fantasy, kind of revealed enchantment to me, through the fairy world. And then identity was this element that I was playing with prior. So I kind of
Mhm.
combined those two things and called it Enchanted Identity, and really took it as the beginning of really looking at ourselves, because it was all about the invisible parts of ourselves that we don't see or that we don't want to see. And so it was really important to me to bring in Enchanted to understand what are those invisible parts of ourselves or unconscious parts of ourselves, right? Bringing psychology
Mhm.
in. And how do we use that to understand our own transformation?
So when you're talking about those parts, is it like our shadow aspects? Is it is it something that we have yet to discover about ourselves, like, as well, or is it the part that we know but we kind of keep under wraps?
It's so interesting you ask it. It depends on the individual, right? Everybody's going through their own cycle in life, through their own pieces, but all of it, right? What's the shadow? What's the self? A lot of Jungian work, Carl Jung work in it, because a lot of times dream is part of how we transform identity. The dreaming time, you are expert in dreams, so there in images, symbols, there's so many different pieces of ourselves that are yet to be uncovered. And
Mm.
so the transformation is actually a cycle. And so it's not just, oh, I'm going to transform today to this and then I'm going to be done, no more transformation. It doesn't really work that way. It's an ongoing process. So that's why it's more of a cycle, and things go in cycles. So you might uncover your shadow,
Yeah.
or in the next one, you might see yourself as multiplicity. You have multiple different types of identity. Or, you might just look at yourself and understand that you're just shifting into a new version of yourself. And what does that shift mean for you? And how do you use it to help you through that process versus to say, no, I'm done with change, right? And so, how do
Yeah.
you? It's a flexible process. My dissertation really is about identity was looked at as something stable. And
Yeah.
my whole point is no, it's flexible. It's
Yeah.
movement. It's change. Change is not, static. So understanding that that's kind of part of you and who you are and these things are happening is really important, and to bring it to the conscious side of ourselves.
So if I'm right in understanding, it's sort of like not you performing as per an archetype that you're choosing. It's more like you're going a bit deeper to reveal what's really there, your true nature, like what else is there, not just the ego encapsulated personality, but the like what's really underneath all of that, like, because sometimes we can be showing one side of ourselves, playful or whatever, but really there's a depth to that person, or vice versa. Somebody who's very deep and wise and quiet can often unexpectedly have a real playful kind of lighthearted nature too, like we talked about that tension between the opposites within the archetypes. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. So, tension is a really fascinating concept. I love the concept of tension. And one of the things that we created in our, this, you won't find this in any books, but we started to see patterns, right? This is part of
Mhm.
psychology. So we started to see these patterns and we started to see how certain archetypes were attracting each other and how they
Mm,
were opposing to each other. And so we were able to, with the 12 archetypes, we were able to create a tension between two of them in the opposite axes.
mhm.
Um, and that really helped the work, because a lot of times when people, and I'll say this, like a lot of people use archetypes, I'm not just the only one, but they don't build tension. And
Mm,
that's where things go wrong. Okay.
okay.
Because if you're just going to build your brand on a certain archetype, that's great and all. But the problem is that you're not going to have any interest. There's nothing exciting about it. The whole point of building an archetype is to build tension. And I say this because, there's stories, Joseph Campbell with The Hero's Journey. There's stories that if you don't have tension, there's no story, right?
Yeah.
You go to the movies and you go to feel the tension, right? The hero comes out and then all of a sudden he rejects the call to adventure, and it's like, no, I'm not gonna do this. And then all of a sudden he's there, he's doing it, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
the whole reveals all the tests and challenges that he confronts to get to a result. We call it the elixir, but sometimes the elixir is not the answer. He gets the results he was looking for, but there's a deeper transformation that occurs, right?
Mm.
So all those things, when you build tension, it built interest.
Yeah. That's really where it kind of connects with the reader or the audience or the end user, the person who's seeking, whether it's a product or a service, or even when you land on a website, you can see straight away whether it's calling it's there's something that calls you in, that curiosity is drawn. And so, like, I used to use archetypes myself, but not like this, so that's why I find your work really interesting, because when I worked with archetypes from a meditation perspective, what I had learned was you can just invoke the quality of an archetype, whatever you needed at a given time. So, like, if my kids were going for an interview for a job, I was just like, invoke kind of Richard Branson, or, whoever your kind of hero would be in that industry. Or, if I was doing a presentation in a corporate environment and I really wanted to engage, I was like, oh, who would do a really good job of this? I had a teacher in mind that I had trained with, and I was like, I'm going to invoke that person. And honestly, I remember that day, I felt like I'd even started speaking like that person. It's a guy and he's American. You know what I mean? I started to, like, my psyche really believed that we were doing this, So I had started off more experimental doing things like that. But my understanding was that there was a sandbox with all of the archetypes and you could kind of pick or choose. But I think your system is a bit different because you're just saying it's more related to who I am as opposed to who I think I would like to be. If that would that make sense?
Yes. That and that's a great thing to bring up, because I do want to say that there's different ways to use archetypes, right? And
Okay.
archetypes aren't just the 12 archetypes that we talk about and that Young talks about. Archetypes can be, like you said, a character or somebody from a movie, or a goddess or a god, that we bring in. And when you do it in that way, it's a little different thing that you're doing. You're kind of bringing them in to help you decipher some things, to help you either empower yourself or get the knowledge that you need in that moment. And those archetypes are great pieces of symbology that kind of come in, and you understand what it kind of means to integrate that archetype into that moment in life that you need it. The way that we use archetypes in branding which is a little different. And through this identity, what I call this uncovering this identity or enchantment identity, is we look at what's your foundational archetype. So what is the foundation? What is the archetype that you came in this life with? Right? We all have a certain archetype, a primary and a secondary archetype that we came in this life with. And so what we do is we uncover that through a series of questions. And then once we get to understanding your archetype, I kind of help you understand, okay, is this it? Is this, does this sound right? And a lot of times I get people like, are you a psychic? Or, you kind of pinpointed me. And it's not, because I just know how to work psychology. And psychology is a patterned kind of system that we can see across human beings, right? If you're a
Mhm.
human being, you can type yourself with an archetype. If you're not a human being, then it's a little bit harder to do. Okay. So, because psychology is so rooted in who we are and the foundational part of us, that's how these archetypes get represented, and we build an archetype. But again, we're not just one dimension, we're multidimensional. That's why I use
Mm.
two archetypes. And the other thing that we do, a primary and a secondary, is because you need to be consistent, specifically when it comes to your identity, to your expertise, to what you do across everything that you do, so people can remember you and recognize you. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's what archetypes also do, right? If we were Heckle and Jide and we were trying to be different archetypes and trying to, I'm going to bring this archetype and then I'm going to use this one, people are like, who is this person? Like,
Yeah, yeah, I
different
get it.
different characters. What is she? And then you can't set something that becomes consistent across
Mm.
time and that people can see you as that individual. So that's why it's really easy to understand brand archetypes through an actual product, right?
Yeah.
So we used, when I was working with billion-dollar brands at Procter Gamble, we would create these stories because it was easy to use archetypes, create the story, define the archetype, define the values, the character, and then we would build this whole story around this character that wasn't a human, right? And so, but it was
Yeah.
consistent, and we were able to tell stories and things like that that you can't do with a product unless it becomes alive, unless it's humanized, right? And so a lot of times you can see that a lot of these products that are really well done are humanized. They humanize the
Mm.
product. And so that's really like where I started. And then I took it into personal branding, or branding for individuals, because I saw such power that it
Mm.
had when you understood and you had the clarity of where this archetype could take you and how you can really develop your brand or your personal brand or your expertise around a character that is you. I'm not,
Yeah,
making this
it's
up or trying to be somebody else. It's a character that is defined in you.
yeah, like you're not trying to be the next somebody else. Like that person's already taken. So it's authentic and it's more aligned, I suppose, with who you are and what you will actually deliver when it comes from that place. It's going to be, people will pick up on that. Like energetically, it's subtle, but you do notice the difference, I guess. So how do people find that? Like, what's the process like? Do you want to go into some of that?
Yeah,
Like,
so basically it's super simple. We ask two questions. The first one is about human behavior. What are the
mhm,
drivers of human behavior? And there's four drivers of human behavior. There's a stable driver, there's a dynamic driver, there's a belonging driver, and there's an independent driver. So those are the
okay.
major drivers, okay, those four. And so first of all, we want to see where your percentage is bigger. Not, people are like, well, I have a little bit of this. Yes, we all have a little bit of all of them. But I want to understand where your percentage is bigger. Are you more about relationships? Or are you more about challenging and simplicity? Are you
Mm,
more about control? Or are you more about being free and being, out there and doing different things? And so really understanding what drives you is primary. So once
Yeah.
we understand that, we go into the second phase. Once I know your driver, that eliminates 9 characters, right? And there's only
Yeah.
3 left in that driver. And so then instead of asking you, are you this archetype or this archetype, I asked you, I have a quote that gets you out of your head and into
Mm.
your heart,
Mm.
right? And that's the main piece, because we don't want to analyze these characters.
Yeah.
They need to come from within you. So that quote kind of helps you disassociate and say, oh, this is more like me, or this is not like me. And then you kind of pick out of those 3, one. And that one gives you your primary archetype. And so once you
Okay.
know your primary archetype, we use that to develop your entire story, to be consistent, with social media around and all these things. This is a great thing for all of us, because we can be an expert in our own area, but we have to be consistent. So it gives us a language that then we can use to be consistent across everything that we do. So when you say a word or a phrase, people are like, oh, I know who that is, right? Or
Hmm.
instead of saying, I know what that brand that is, you're like, oh, I know who that is. And it's really interesting, because my nephew, he's 7, and he recognizes these, brands. And he's like, if I don't have that brand, then I don't want it. I don't want
Yeah. Yeah.
a fake brand.
Yeah. It
And
has to be the real deal. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
he's like, I don't want fake Oreos. I want the real Oreos, or, things like that. And so it what happens is that consistency gives
Yeah.
us a personality, and that's who we connect to.
Yeah. That's really like how brands get successful, I guess, because they are the real deal and it's the one that everybody wants. They don't want the fake version or the version that's kind of, copying it. You can tell the difference very easily. So, my other question for you then, Yamilca, is, you know, you obviously see a lot of kind of brands or, services that are on in the marketplace that are not optimizing their archetypes, that are not really making any impact at all, like that they're just missing something. And is it possible to just pick up where, even when a brand is going in the wrong direction entirely, and recover that to is that a possibility? Is that something you've done?
Yes, yes, it is possible, and it's actually essential. And but you have to recognize it, right? The first thing is recognizing that there's something wrong, that
Yeah.
you either the brand or your brand is not going in the right direction, right? And I can't help you unless you actually recognize that,
Yeah.
understand that that is an issue, right? In the study that I'm doing, the way transformation happens, the first thing happens is rupture. Something
Okay.
rupture, something blows up, some problem surfaces, right? And that's when you have to do something, like either change or modify, or do something about that rupture. And so the first thing that you do is you look at your brand and ask the tough questions, right? So
Okay.
what's happening to the brand? Am I differentiated in the market? Am I differentiated against my competitors? If I'm not, what's happening? Why am I not differentiated? Am I getting the right leads? Okay, I talk about superfan in my whole piece, because instead of avatar and all those things, you have a super fan, one
Okay.
super fan that loves everything that you do. And I think that's important to know. It's not that you have one person.
Yeah.
It's that if you can focus on that individual, it gives you a broader effect, right? If we go after everybody, then we have nothing. And so
Yeah, yeah.
that's really the concept of a super fan. And I think a lot of times it's hard to understand that because, especially for big companies, they might think like, oh, if I focus on one person, how am I going to make my numbers? And
Yeah.
so it's not about that. It's about being very clear about who you are and who you're not.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I see these brands that they're all on top of each other, right?
Mhm.
And there's no clear differentiation between the bundle. And I think people don't, sometimes don't see the opportunity that they have bringing in tension. That's where when tension becomes like a really critical and important piece, because then you're like, oh, I'm not differentiated. Why am I not differentiating? Because you're speaking like very closely and you're not bringing interest in. So that tension brings in that interest. But when you know your character, you have to go for that specific tension, because if not, it's not going to make any sense. And so,
Mm.
and I call that your super fan, right? Because we are attracted to opposites.
Yeah.
Opposites attract. It's a fact. And so when we look at that opposite, we want to attract that opposite. What happens when we attract a lot of people say, okay, who's your avatar, who's your ideal client? And they're all like, oh, well, it's somebody like me. And I'm like, no, it's somebody
No.
exactly not like you. Because when you
Yeah,
attract somebody like you, what happens is that they're like, I can figure that out, I can do it myself, I can kind
that's
of,
true.
understand that, or I can do my own home remedy. But when you get that person opposite to you, they're like, I need her, she knows what she's doing, I'm just going to follow what she does, I'm just going to do what she does because she knows and I don't. And so
Yeah.
that's really the key piece, is to understand who that opposite is and then create language. Okay, get this. This is the key here. Create language that brings intention. Okay.
Okay.
So your brand has a language. Your super fan has a language. You have to have a language that bridges both of
Okay.
those, so you can attract your super fan and
Yeah.
you can be on brand. And that's the key, and not people aren't doing that or using that as part of their strategy.
And is that where you do, like, you have to ask all these questions and you have to really ascertain those what that opposite is? Like that's really the critical part I'm understanding now. So um it's so fascinating, isn't it? Like for me, it makes so much more sense. Like I never thought of it this way, but it really makes a lot of sense. So like you're looking for the complete opposite to you because you have something that they want, or there's some aspect of you that they desire, or see through. Like, are they then going to get that? Like, how? What's the kind of the exchange? How does that happen then in the
Yeah.
market? Like,
So it's really I think the questions are really great, because let me before answering that question, I want to go to something that's really critical, that we went into it a little bit yesterday, is this whole space of AI, right?
oh
And
yes, okay,
so we ask AI to do this, and AI kind of just comes out and gives us blob or a blah, and then we copy and paste it, and we think that is going to help our brand. And AI doesn't know anything about us.
true.
And sometimes even people are like, well, how do I describe myself to AI? They don't even know how to do that. Like everybody's like, oh yeah, just put your character in there. And it's like, I don't even know my character. A lot of people are like, I don't
Yeah,
know what
yeah,
that is. How do I put my character in there? And you have to be very strategic when you're using AI,
yeah,
right? Because AI are just you know, if you ask the wrong question, it'll give you the wrong answer. And
True.
so I think one of the things that has been really successful with this methodology is telling AI your character, like I am a lover or I am a, ruler or an explorer. My opposite is this. Can you create a communication strategy that brings to life my two characters' intention?
Hmm.
And when you do that, it does something so fascinating. Like it really brings to life your language. And then you can code that in
Hmm.
to the AI program and ask it to give you social media posts, newsletters, documents, whatever you're creating.
Hmm.
Uh, but that way it can keep the language consistent. What happens a lot of times is that we go into these AI programs and we say, give me a social media calendar for 90 days or whatever. And it just gives you this very generic calendar that you use, and then you're wondering why you're not getting any hits or nobody's coming to your page. And so it's really important to give it the right information so the output is great. I used to, when I started this work, there wasn't really AI programs, and I would do this all on my own and create all this language and all these things for my client. And now it's so simple. You can actually code it in,
Okay.
and now it's creating something for you. And you can use the opposite, and you can kind of really use it to bring it to life much more.
Do you have a preference when you're codifying like that for yourself or for a client? Is there one AI tool better than others, that really can do this efficiently? Like it feels to me like I think you were working on something where you were looking at an AI archetype brand identifier sort of a tool. I'm not sure how that's coming along, but is there one in particular, or what direction do you go? Because there's a lot of tools out there.
No, yeah, there's so many tools out there. So I'm going to be completely transparent and say I started with chat because obviously chat was the one that was available and you could code in certain characteristics. And
Yeah.
so we started in chat. Um, what we haven't really switched over to Claude and tested that out yet. But I've been using Claude a lot lately, and I think it has potential to actually do a better job.
Yeah.
And one of my clients, where we had coded everything in chat because that's what they were using, the systems they were using, they just called me up and said, "Hey, we're switching everything over to Claude. Do you think you can switch it over to Claude?" And we think that it is possible. We haven't tried it yet, but we said yes, we can go ahead and do that work if you want to, because now Claude just wasn't where we needed it to be when we started this project
I
last
get you.
year.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think now we can really code it into Claude. So which one is better? I mean, I would say chat, that's where we started. It still works well. It still does things well. I actually had a client that wrote me and said, I've never had so many people sign up for my offer until I started using your coding, your archetype
Wow.
coding piece. And so because it just defines the problem, and it stays in
Mhm.
your lane. And so like, I think you can do it in Claude, but I can't say that I've used it for that. I'm in the process of starting to really get into Claude, and you know this because we've been talking about it. I love how it's working, and I love everything that it's doing. I think it's possible, but I haven't started there yet.
Cool. Yeah, I have a friend who's been using, a few different AI tools, and she seems to have kind of something going on with each one, and then sometimes she kind of cross pollinates them. she passes
Yeah.
them over, and I think we're living in this kind of AI world now, and it's best to kind of get in there early and really get to know it and understand it. And I really do believe that we can bring AI into our day to day. I know a lot of people have a lot of fear around AI. They're worried about people losing their jobs and everything. But the way I see it is, what if it makes our jobs and the work that we're doing so much more efficient, and frees up our time so that we can go and hang out in galleries or cafes or go listen to live music or spend time in nature, where as opposed to in front of a computer, because you can just set the computer to work and it can do that. And, so I'm a big fan of
Yeah,
work
I'll
online.
tell you, my productivity has gone up since
Yeah.
I started using AI. I just can do, I mean, I was fast. So I would just say that I was fast already, but it's made me even way faster. Like I just have this thought and I can get it out on it. I actually sometimes have to stop myself, like, Yamilca, don't do this because, once you get started, you're not coming out. You don't have time for this today. But I do believe that it's just an incredible tool. I don't think you take it completely as a given.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you have to bring in your own thoughts and your own strategy and your own critical thinking. Um, and the other piece to this is I teach a lot of design thinking, and that's all about creative solving problems. And
Hmm.
um, so when you solve problems creatively, you use your critical thinking. And I think you can use that to make it even better, right? I don't think Chat or Claude is going to answer all your questions. I think
Yeah.
it's a tool like everything else. Like what I do is a tool. I have to code it correctly though, right? I can't just go and say, hey, I'm just going to do this. It takes, you have to know what you're doing to code it and make sure
Yeah.
all the communication is in there. And then when you put it in there, it's always using that as as to get your information from. I think we think that we just say something and it just happens like that. And
Yeah.
it really doesn't. You have to use a lot of your own intuition and your thoughts and what you read, everything that you read and you take in and all this information, and then
Yeah.
you can put it in the system and then it organizes it, right? What it's been great for me, because I'm a very creative visual kind of individual. I know you are too. What's been great for me, it helps me organize my thoughts, because
Yeah.
thoughts are like, my husband always like, you were over here and now you're over here. Like, how did
How
you
do
get
we get
from
there?
here to here? And it's just the way my brain works, right? So my
Mm.
brain is always like just everywhere. And so when I put thoughts in, they're like all over the place. And what Chat and Claude has been able to do for me is really organize those thoughts. And sometimes, which is great, sometimes I put something in and it's like, why did it say that? Like, that's not what I wanted. Well, that's what it understood. So obviously, I'm the one doing it wrong here.
Yeah, a big dose of discernment is really necessary as well when you're using these tools. And they always do say, like, read the small print. It does say you have to check everything. You can't just copy and paste it all in and hope for the best. It's down to your own discernment and how you engage with it, like what you're inputting and what you're taking out of it. It's a process too, I guess. You know what I mean? But like you said, I love how it organizes our thoughts, especially when you're very Vata. We studied Ayurveda at the same time. So the Ayurvedic kind of world, like that's what I love about my version of ChatGPT, because it responds to me through the eyes of Ayurveda, because I ask everything through that kind of, those glasses, and it gives me really good kind of insights. And I've been thinking about ways to help my clients, and you probably do the same, to use it for their kind of daily routine, or how to get themselves back in balance, from the Ayurvedic perspective, or just from kind of taking better care, like self-care and things like that. So do you find that, does your work go into kind of people's individual kind of inner work as well? Is there an element of that?
That's a really great question. There was a point where I was calling myself the brand therapist because I felt like I was doing a lot of therapy. And
Mm,
when you work in psychology, and specifically with Jungian work or Carl Jung work, you start going into realms that are unconscious to yourself. And the whole point of psychology is to bring it to the conscious world.
mm,
And so I think a lot of times, we play in these spaces where we're not fully there. And actually, if we look at data, we're kind of like a mountain, right? And only the little piece is the part of the brain that we use is only 3%. And there's still 97% there that is unconscious, at the
yeah.
unconscious level. So I think a lot of times we have to kind of think through and understand where we are in life, and how, and help other people, because that's the whole point of your question is, do you get into some psychological or therapy kind of elements? And I have to. There's no way
Yeah.
out of that. Because I'll tell you, I've gotten clients where they get stuck, and
Yeah.
they're like, I don't think I'm ready for this. I don't think I'm ready to put myself in that position. And they might not be ready, right? And that's
Mm,
okay. You're not ready, don't do it. But it's that fear that
yeah.
stops us from fully being who we are, right? And it's so interesting. Like, we went to see the Michael Jackson movie, and it was so much. I mean, I couldn't stop dancing. I just got up there and started dancing,
At the
and
movie.
yeah, and I was having so much
Cool.
fun, and yeah, it was great. And my husband was like, "Why are you doing that?" And it was an interesting conversation. It was like a therapeutic conversation, saying, I'm like, "But that's me. That's who I am. I want to be, like, if I hear something, I got to move, right? And I'm not going to stop moving because I'm fearful of what somebody's going to say, or somebody's." And it was interesting because he's like, "Well, I would never do something like that." And he's 6'4", and he says that, if when he was a child, this is a child thing, this is where therapy comes in, right? This, as a child, he didn't want to be looked at because he was so tall already.
Ah,
Anything he did, everybody was looking at him, right? And so he would hide, right? And so these are things that happen to us unconsciously that
mm,
we need to uncover, because it doesn't help us become who we fully need to be in this world.
yeah.
And so through that process of archetypes, and this is what I love about this work that I do, is through the process of archetypes, you reveal your authentic self, and you're unapologetic of who that
Mm,
individual is, because that's the whole point. Why are you going to be somebody else? Why are you going to hide behind the shadow? Why are you, doing all these things if you're not going to be yourself? If you're not going to be, if you're
mm.
not going to take on those things. And I'll tell you, it's not easy, right? It's not
No.
easy to just say, I'm going to be this person, this is my authentic self, blah, 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 blah. It's not an easy thing to do. But for me, it's my purpose. And and there's things that drive me there. And it's like, I have to do it now, right?
Yeah.
I have to go there, because if I don't, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to feel like I didn't accomplish what I came here to accomplish.
That's really interesting. So there has to be that kind of wall. You have to hit the wall, or the
The
rupture,
rupture,
or
yeah.
the challenge, and to go through it. Like, that's the continuity of our process of changing or transforming or whatever. So I know you're like, let's go, just flip back to your dissertation, because I think that's really interesting how that even in itself has been evolving for you. And, I know you talked a lot about symbology there, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, if you want to, about the symbology within that but within what you're writing in your dissertation, I think
Yeah.
that's an interesting
I
concept.
yeah, I'd love to talk about this because this was a huge insight for me in particular. So, as I was really looking at the beginning of my dissertation, I told you I looked at Enchanted Identity, and then I moved into really looking at identity, but as a transformational tool.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the things that I was ignoring through the whole process was the symbology part of that. And I didn't really recognize it until I had a dream, and then combined with this mastermind I was doing, kind of all, how things, like we say, there's things that happen in the waking world and in the dream world, and like all of a sudden it's the same thing, but we're not really paying attention.
Yeah.
So when all of a sudden I realized that symbols are just connected to our psyche in
Hmm.
many different ways, in dreams and images and different ways. And it's there before we even know that we're going through a transformation phase. And so basically it's telling us, hey, hello, we're here, we're your symbols, and we're going to walk you through a transformation phase, and you're ignoring it, or you're unconscious of it, and you're not realizing it, and it keeps kind of, right, the synchronicity, it keeps showing up in different ways, and until you can't ignore it anymore, you have the rupture, and then you go through the process. But I think what symbols do is, if you can recognize it, like recognize something, and you're like, you don't have to give it a meaning, right? It's not about,
Okay.
oh, this is this, right? But just recognizing that that symbol is reoccurring or happening, or you had it in a dream, and then trying to understand what it's taking you through, right? And
Okay.
letting it take you through that process. Like, yeah, I don't feel well, maybe I need to go through this, and then being in a space of kind of like testing things out, the threshold, the edges, and then integration, back to the return, or that integration element. And I think transformation can
Hmm.
be a practical, or a process that is not, we think transformation is like this vague thing,
Yeah.
right? It has no, oh yeah, when did you transform? It's like I can't pinpoint things, but I
Hmm.
believe you're going to go through several transformation phases, and I
Yeah.
think you can go through that transformation phase using symbols as a mediator. So the symbol mediates the transformation, and it helps you process it mentally and psychologically and in your body. And so now you
So,
can take yourself through a transformation process over and over and over again if you want
mhm.
to, consciously.
So is the symbol about making you aware that you're in a recurring theme, and but now that you're aware of it because it's recurring, you're like, ah, this is the symbol, not necessarily a particular meaning, but it's kind of recognizing that you're on this roundabout again, or on this
Yeah.
rodeo again, or whatever it is. So you're like, oh, I've been here before. I recognize this place. So, like, is it like also then that you're going to do something different to get a different result? Because if you keep doing the same thing, you just stay the same. So you need to kind of maybe shift your perspective or something. Like, can you
Yeah.
just break that down a
So
little bit more
let
for
me
me?
break that down a little bit so it's understandable. So what happens is, symbology doesn't have to be something that is bad. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it can come in different forms. You
Yeah.
described a certain form. So let's say that something happens and you recognize, oh, I'm back in this place. What's happening at that specific stage of what you're referring to is that you haven't fully gone through the transformation
Yeah.
that you were supposed to go through. But that doesn't always happen in that way, but it can. Okay, that's one way. So then what you have to say is, okay, there's something that's telling me, right? That's the rupture that is telling me I have to go through this, or because I can't be this person or this thing anymore, right? I can't do this anymore. I'm
Yeah.
done. I have to move on, move into the next phase of my life, or whatever you want to call it. So then what you do is you recognize it. That's the primary thing, is to recognize that constant pattern, that symbol that is coming into you, and understand that there's something in your life that is telling you can't continue this path.
Okay.
No, you have to move on. You have to get through this. And this happens a lot with people who are grieving, or just different things, right? That come into your life, or your trauma or something like that. And
Yeah.
you got to move on, right? You got to move forward
Yeah.
into your life. You can't have that trauma or that grief hold you
Yeah.
in that place, because you're not going to be well, right? Transformation is actually a health process, a healthy process for us. Change is
Yeah.
healthy. You know, we look at change a lot of times as humans as like, I don't want to go through any more change. I've changed so much. And it's actually a good thing. Going through constant change
Yeah.
is helps you clean out your system. And
Yeah.
so so you have that symbol that keeps reoccurring. You pay attention to it. You understand that you can't go on your life like this. And so what happens is then you stay in this space of, it could be a threshold, it could be a liminal space. So you
Mhm.
kind of let it work through, but with your conscious self, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
work through it in dreams, or work through it in real life, but work through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not like ignore it or run away from it or be afraid of it. Actually work that problem through. And then it takes you to, that's where the transformation happens. When you
Okay.
allow it to come in and get you to the other side. That other side is the return, right? So that other side is where you've completed, you're integrating
Yeah.
now that piece that you lost. You leave that other piece out. You kind of let that go, right? Or we say, let it go. You let that go, and you bring in this new piece into your life that you're going to now integrate, and then you're
Yeah.
going to come out the other side. And then that's a cycle,
Yeah.
right? It's not like, oh, I came out the other side. Goodbye. I'm done. Shoo, I'm done. No, this is a continuous process, right? As we get old, right? Every year we get another year on us. And that's a cyclical process, right? You were in your 20s, now you're in your 30s, right? Your 40s. And so that's a cyclical process that just happens, and your body changes, you change, everything changes. And so it's the
Totally.
same thing. Transformation is the same thing, but the symbol is a mechanism. The symbol is this
Okay.
mechanism that helps you with this transformation. So
Mhm.
paying attention to the symbols in your
Yeah.
life or something that happened will kind of initiate that process for you. And then you just go through the elements of, okay, let me see what this means. What do I need to let go of?
Yeah.
Let that go and bring in this new you, this new thing, this new whatever it is, and then integrate it,
Yeah.
right? So once you let go, this new thing comes, and you then integrate, and then you go back to the process. What happens though a lot of times is that we can't let go. Not
Yeah, we're attached. Yeah.
or we can't integrate.
So
And
what are
if
kind of key
you don't
steps
let
in
go,
the in
we can't integrate. Sorry, go
so
ahead.
let's see with the integration part, like what sort of integration processes are you kind of leaning into there? Is it just acknowledgement? Is it, doing something different? Is it making a permanent change in some, I don't know, way of expressing yourself or doing things or
Yeah, so let me give you a very literal example so people
yeah.
can understand, because I think it's easier this way. Okay, so let's say you started taking some exercising classes, some
Yeah.
weights. Okay. So you let go of your running because your running isn't helping you, and you kind of like, okay, I'm not running anymore. I'm going to do weights. I'm going to do heavy weights.
Okay.
The thing is, I take these weights and I do some weights and I don't really do the full thing. Or I do an hour here, I do an hour there. I don't take it seriously. I
Yeah.
don't integrate it into my life.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't work. You didn't even gain any muscle. You just left it. You went back to running. Okay?
Yeah.
That did not change anything, right? You recognize that there was something. You tried it, but it didn't work as fast as you wanted to, or it was too hard, or it was the whole point of change or transformation or is that you are doing the work. It's not easy. It's hard.
Yeah, yeah.
And
You have to keep
so,
showing up.
and that's why you see those people who transform their bodies.
Yeah.
That's a literal transformation
Yeah,
because
true.
they were able to get through that threshold and integrate, right?
Yeah.
When you integrate, you see results. When you don't integrate, you don't see anything.
Like in meditation, we have an integration period after every meditation because meditation is transformational. You know what I mean? It's a purification process. So
It
it's
is.
sort of like cleaning out the kind of the mind, it's slowing it down, it's interrupting some of the patterning, it may be self-inquiry, breath awareness, whatever your practice is. But as when I'm teaching meditation or teaching others to teach it, the key point is the last 3 minutes where you have to stay sitting. You're not doing any practice anymore, but you're sitting with the benefit of the practice. And that's when the integration of your practice happens. You go into just no, you're not focused on anything, you're not meditating anymore, but you just sit and you just really, like I'll often say to people, really ground your practice, feel your feet on the ground,
Let it
feel your
in.
physical body. And just, I always ask people to acknowledge how they feel now,
Mm.
having completed a practice versus when I ask them to check in how they're feeling before we start. So, and the contrast between how we arrive at a meditation practice and we're frazzled and we're finding it hard to sit down and we're all over the place, and just how that kind of sequence of breath and awareness and things like that can bring us into the state of coherence. But the real key part is the integration at the end, that you carry that coherence through your
Exactly.
day. It's
And
like
then
your
you
yoga
come back
practice
to
or
it.
yeah, yeah.
And then you come back to it. That means the integration had fully achieved because you can come back to it the next day and it makes it easier and easier, just like building the muscle, right? If once you
Yeah.
integrate it, it's easier every day to do it. And it becomes an easy thing and then becomes part of who you are.
Yeah, like I found it really interesting when we were chatting about, from a dream yoga perspective, how stuff that's going on in our waking state is usually reflected in the dream state. So if we're having a really chaotic day or there's a lot going on, our dream state can be quite chaotic as well. It can really reflect that. And then equally, if you have chaotic dreams and they're just fragments and it's or night terrors or whatever is going on, you're waking up with that in your system. Like, so the dream yoga is about creating more tone between the waking state and the dream state. And you really, I suppose it's about cultivating your awareness in both states. And I think that's a lot similar to what you're doing with the archetype work and the symbology, and just being able to help people kind of, I suppose, spot where the wall is, spotting where the, the rupture, or the, that interference is, and then learning how to, I suppose, embody that. Is it's a case of embodying it, really, I guess, is it?
Yeah, embodying it. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. This has been such a great hour. It flew. Oh my God, Yamilca. You know, if you want to connect with Yamilca and find out more and bring your brand alive, is what I would suggest. I'm just going to put the banner up again of her website is bespokebranding.io, and it should be there below, and it's also in the bio underneath, and in both Spotify and in YouTube. And the other thing I'd like to say is, you are writing, you have a book already out. Do you want to just give us what is the title of your book?
So it's right here. Let me just grab it. Sorry, off camera. It's
The
called Brand
review.
Archetype. This is everything about archetypes. It does talk about the tension and everything. This is my
Cool.
book. I'll be writing one about my dissertation once it's all over, which it'll take about another year. And then I have many collaborative books. But if you want to look into archetypes, this is the book, Brand Archetype.
I highly recommend it. I just think it's the way forward, especially if you're going to start using the AI tools. If you can have that kind of inner work or that inner connection, and you bring that in, it's got to be a win-win. So listen, connect, subscribe. Come back next week. We'll be here again. Warm welcome, our gratitude, should I say, to Yamilca. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your time. And oh, that was such an interesting conversation. Really appreciate it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
And thank you to all the listeners. See you next week.